Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. Day 2 of the criminal trial of Donald Trump. And today we heard in great detail how Trump and his gang conspired to hide all his worst secrets, well, at least some of them, while Trump and his lawyer continued to stretch the patience of Judge Juan Merchan. Now, the morning started with a hearing on the gag order that judge had already issued, which Trump has repeatedly and flagrantly been violating on social media and elsewhere. We will have more on that later in the show, but suffice to say, the entire event was a huge embarrassment for Trump's attorney, Todd Blanche. Like every Trump employee, Blanche, once an assistant U.S. attorney for the Southern District of New York, was forced to repeatedly debase himself in service of his boss, because if you agree to work for Trump, the threshold qualification is to be the kind of person who only cares, first and foremost, about pleasing him rather than, well, doing your job. In fact, in his opening statements on Monday, Blanche went out of his way to let everyone know he was speaking to an audience of one when he insisted on referring to his client, criminal defendant, and private citizen as President Trump, and then saying, quote, "You're going to hear me refer to him as President Trump. This is a title he has earned because he was our 45th president. We will call him President Trump out of respect for the office he held from 2017 to 2021. But as we saw today, as we will likely continue to see, as we've seen in many, many different venues, in many different situations, pleasing Donald Trump and doing your job, in this case, providing him the best legal representation, often a mutually exclusive choice. That theme continued when longtime publisher of the National Enquirer, David Pecker, took the stand again this afternoon for a second day of testimony. Pecker outlined how, while running the National Enquirer, he worked with Trump and Michael Cohen to both suppress negative stories about the then presidential candidate and to plant negative and presumably baseless stories about Trump's political opponents. Quote, Michael Cohen would call me and say, "We would like for you to run a negative article on, let's say, for argument's sake, on Ted Cruz." Then he would send me information about Ted Cruz or Ben Carson or about Marco Rubio. That was the basis of our story, and then we would embellish it from there. Upon further questioning, Pecker clarified, quote, "Michael Cohen wasn't part of the campaign. When he said we, I thought he was talking about himself and Mr. Trump." It sounds like Pecker believed that he was acting at the direction of Donald Trump when he published stories like this about Texas Senator Ted Cruz, who challenged Trump in the 2016 primary, having extramarital affairs with multiple women, 5 secret mistresses, actually. Or this story, remember this one? This one got a little bit of attention, which Pecker admitted to making up, linking Cruz's father to the John F. Kennedy assassination. Remember that one? Of course, the substance of this trial is about what the Enquirer did not publish as part of its practice in the tabloid world known as catch and kill, during which it helped suppress stories about Trump's own affairs, culminating in a 2015 meeting between Pecker, Trump, and Cohen.
Tonight, a person familiar with the matter tells NBC News in August 2015, candidate Trump was in the room when Cohen and National Enquirer publisher David Pecker discussed ways Pecker's company, AMI, could help quash negative stories about Mr. Trump's relationships with women.
That was from 2018 when that meeting was first reported. Now, according to Pecker, in that 2015 meeting in August, he told Trump and Michael Cohen, quote, "I said that anything I hear in the marketplace, if I hear anything negative about yourself or I hear anything about women selling stories, I would notify Michael Cohen, as I did over the last several years. I would notify Michael Cohen, and then he would be able to have them kill in another magazine or have them not be published, or somebody would have to purchase them." Today's testimony ended with something of a cliffhanger as Pecker began to outline the plan to pay off Playboy model Karen McDougal to cover up her own story of an affair with Trump. According to Pecker's testimony, one of his editors approached him in the spring of 2016 about McDougal with the understanding that she wanted someone to purchase and bury the story of her affair. Pecker says he contacted Michael Cohen, who insisted on communicating through an encrypted app. Cohen apparently grew increasingly agitated as Pecker's editor worked to vet McDougal's story, with Pecker saying, quote, "He kept on calling, and each time he called, he seemed more anxious." Adding, quote, "I assumed he had the conversation with Mr. Trump, and Mr. Trump was asking Michael Cohen, did we hear anything yet?" Pecker also testified that Trump called him directly about the McDougal story, with the then candidate saying, quote, "I spoke to Michael, and, quote, he told me about Karen, and Trump said to me, what do you think?" Pecker said he told Trump to purchase the McDougal story, The former editor will resume his testimony on Thursday. We have the day off tomorrow for the trial, but we already know how this story ends. The Inquirer paid McDougal $150,000 for the rights to her story and her silence. But here's the asterisk, which is great. Trump was supposed to repay Pecker. Pecker wasn't just like doing this as charity. He was the pass-through, if you will. But Trump did what he always does. He stiffed him on the bill, $150,000, which is why Michael Cohen was the one forced to pay Stormy Daniels out of his own pocket. And that, of course, is why Trump was ultimately in court today.